waistcoats. I'm wearing a sleeved waistcoat over a wool waistcoat. I'm dressed as a militia officer with a sword, sash as my rank, and a silver gorget. Obviously upper middle class, and I had the experience of 20 years ago serving in the French and Indian War as a junior officer, where I acquired my gorget. And I've been elected to be a militia officer. Again, the militia was a local military organization that appointed its own officers, its own NCOs, and basically was an adjunct to the community. There was no police force. There wasn't a police force in New York City or Boston either. In a time of emergency, they would call out the militia, and these men had some military training. And as we'll see, as we flash forward in a few days, when bloodshed occurs outside of Boston, the organized militia can really do damage to a professional military force that isn't properly prepared.
It's very similar to taking bayonets.
Load and fire these flintlock weapons. The weapon of the period was a smooth bore musket. Most of the men are armed with British weapons, which would have been the 75 caliber Brown Bess. That musket has a bore of 3/4 of an inch. Smooth bore being equivalent today to a 12 gauge shotgun. There's no rifling, there's no grooves in the barrel to put spin on the ball. So when you load a solid ball down a musket, it rattles down the barrel and goes off in any direction it wants to at the end. Very inaccurate weapon, very short-ranged weapon. You probably have a killing distance at 100 yards. So if you think about it, in the 18th century, they're fighting wars with weapons at ranges that we play sports on. 100 yards is the equivalent of a football field, a soccer field. So imagine two armies. You've heard of Montcalm and Wolfe at the Battle of Quebec in Canada, British against the French, lining up at 100 yards and shooting at one another. But why could they do this? Because the weapons were incredibly inaccurate, and you had to fire in a massed volley together to throw lead in a wall at the enemy so somebody got hit. And then you had to practice reloading, and there are approximately 13 steps which you'll see these men be drilled in to load and be prepared to fire the weapon a second time. And that's what they call volley fire. So a professional soldier in the 18th century, someone who drilled 8 hours a day and was a British soldier in Boston drilling on the Common every day, he could get off 4 shots a minute. A regiment of soldiers, which was the usual unit that was in the field, was supposed to be between 500 and 600 men. So if the regiment lined up and was aiming at the enemy and fired, they'd send 600 balls downfield. And then 15 seconds later, after making all the reload, they'd fire again. Another 600 balls down the field. And 15 seconds later, another 600 balls. The whole concept of the drill is to turn a platoon, a company, a regiment into a human machine gun. Every 15 seconds to fire that volley at the enemy. And that is also why you can see in historical paintings, in proper reenactments of documentaries and movies. Everybody's standing up in the open field because you have to load these muskets from the muzzle. You can't lay down and do this simply, especially if you're going to speed reload in any timely manner. So for soldiers to stand up in an open field and shoot at each other at very short range was all because of the weapon system that they used. This weapon system came in about 1700 and lasted through the early 1800s. For about 150 years, these flintlock weapons were the masters of the battlefield. And when technology changed about the time of the American Civil War, when they started rifling the barrels for accuracy, where the bullet now could go 300 yards, and using weapons that fired with a percussion cap instead of a flintlock, which meant that every time the cock went forward, the gun would go off. The technology changed so dramatically that it ended up causing tremendous casualties. And if you think about the American Civil War, the generals were all trained at West Point to use muskets, and they'd all fought in the Mexican War using muskets. And suddenly, they're handed new technology where they can end up causing tremendous damage at a long distance, and they had to learn tactics all over again. And this happens constantly in military history, where technology changes, the tactics don't change. The next generation went into World War I against the machine gun. Same thing happened all over again. Next generation went into World War II, suddenly you had tanks. It's something that we should all study and be aware of. It always seems we're fighting the next war with the last war's tactics or technology mindset.